Good afternoon, everyone. Bon après-midi, tout le monde, et bienvenue.
Good afternoon, and welcome to the Avenir Center.
Public session of Moncton City Council. Madame la Greffière.
We have an agenda before.
Madam Clerk.
So is there someone who wishes to approve the agenda for this afternoon? Thank you, Deputy Mayor Thériault, and seconded by Councillor LeBlanc. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries unanimously.
Reading of meeting notice. Please be advised there will be a special public meeting of City Council at the Avenir Center, Lonsbury Lounge, Moncton, New Brunswick, on Wednesday, September 11th, 2024 at 6 p.m. for the consideration of the following. Reports from administration. Presentation by New Brunswick political party leaders and local candidates. Green Party, Liberal Party, Progressive Conservative Party. Your Worship, are there any conflicts of interest? Declarations. Déclaration de conflit d'intérêt.
I do not see any. I think we're good. Excellent. So thank you all for being here tonight and for participating in this very special public session. Council and residents don't have the opportunity very often to hear directly from party leaders on topics that are specific to our community. So to start, I'd like to remind everyone of the format for today's meeting. Each party will have a 30-minute time period. So the first 10 minutes with a 2-minute warning will be for the party leader to speak on the 4 priorities that we have put forward in a document that was shared with the parties and of course is also on our website. Our priorities, which are in alignment with the Union of New Brunswick Municipalities and the Association Francophone des Municipalités du Nouveau-Brunswick, are municipal fiscal reform, housing, social needs, and community safety. The final 20 minutes after the 10-minute introduction, which we're going to be very strict on, will be for council to ask specific questions on these priorities. We ask that the leaders respond to the questions and that we ask that they are asked in a succinct manner so that we can cover as much ground as possible. La soirée va se dérouler.
The evening will have 2 parts to it. So the first 10 minutes will allow the leaders of the different parties to speak directly about the priorities put forth by council: municipal fiscal reform, housing, social needs, and safety in the community. After that, there will be 20 minutes for a question period coming from councillors.
Questions. Each party will follow the same format. The order of presentations has been established as follows: Green Party, Liberal Party, Progressive Conservative Party. So, to councillors, I would let you know that the microphones are sensitive and counterintuitive. Up means on and down means off. So, I know, it's weird. Let's get to it. I would like to welcome David Kuhn from the Green Party, and I hope that you will come to the podium and please introduce your candidates to us.
Thank you very much, Mayor Arnold. Merci beaucoup. Et merci pour l'invitation d'être ici avec vous.
Thank you very much for the opportunity to speak with you tonight about the very important issues.
So, yes, thank you. Let me introduce some of the Moncton candidates, some Moncton area candidates on our slate who are with me tonight as part of our excellent slate of candidates from around the province. So we have Diani Blanco for Moncton East, Vincent Marola for Moncton South, Sarah Lord for Riverview, and Jacques Giguère will be here shortly, I believe, for Dieppe Memram Cook. In Fredericton,
I am known as an MP who is accessible, who listens, and who acts when it comes time to resolve problems.
To like to solve a problem. That's how I and my colleagues in the Green Caucus function in the Legislative Assembly as parliamentarians. That's how I function as leader of my party, and that's how my caucus, our caucus, and myself will function should we be chosen to govern this province or hold the balance of power. I know that people are concerned with the way government is failing them, that they feel poorly served, and that includes municipalities. The problems that have been raised over and over and over again have been kicked down the road, and the pace at which issues get addressed is really a snail's pace. That's got to change. I like the idea of a slapshot speed for addressing solutions. That's the kind of action we need once the decision is taken. 10 years in the legislature, 10 years of committee work, I have a pretty good understanding of where the roadblocks are and how to remove them. I know Moncton's experiencing extraordinary growth, which presents extraordinary opportunities, but also represents extraordinary challenges at the same time. And those are both short-term, sort of in your dooryard now, and those that are building and will become problems sooner than later. So with respect to municipal reform, we've had a huge change in local governance across the province. And what we haven't had is a huge change in the fiscal arrangement to ensure municipalities can deliver on their responsibilities. And by the way, I wanted to thank you for your public service. As a provincial politician, I well understand the sacrifices you make, the time you put in, and certainly more in some ways than provincial politicians that you don't have the kind of support that we do in terms of staff and so on. So with respect to the fiscal framework, there needs to be support, and we would see it in the form of a number of things. Certainly transferring the lion's share of the provincial portion of the industrial property tax to Moncton and other municipalities, with the small exception we still need at the provincial level a sliver of that to ensure environmental enforcement is covered for those industries. Yes, of course, to finally implement the commitment to provide the excise tax revenue from cannabis to the municipalities, and then come to agreement, and it's going to be different, I think, in different municipalities over how best to further supplement the income of municipalities like Moncton to meet their varying and different needs, because all the needs are different. We've got overhauled the equalization formula to make it transparent and fair, comprehensible, which it's not, and that's a straightforward action that needs to be tackled in consultation with municipalities. We will review and overhaul provincial assessment legislation to make it transparent and fair, to ensure that properties, especially industrial properties that tend to be assessed at a pretty low level compared to the rest of the country, that their assessments start to line up with what's typical elsewhere in Canada, so that that's fair and the taxation that flows as a result is appropriate. We will provide flexibility in property taxation by eliminating the multipliers that you're constrained by right now. Our party believes that municipalities need the flexibility to manage tax rates for the different tax categories without being encumbered by the multipliers. So we would eliminate those multipliers so that you're not stuck when you want to, say, modify industrial rates of having to also change residential rates at the same time. That would be gone. And we would add additional categories as well, if desired in consultation for you and other municipalities. On housing, we would mandate what I call the new MB housing, which has had its tires reinflated and it's been staffed up after really being a paper exercise for quite a long time, to drive the development of non-market, non-profit, cooperative housing, because that's affordable. Both new builds and renos are repurposing existing buildings, some of which exist under provincial ownership, and we would create a bank of those and make them available to the municipality, and in your case to Moncton. But we need to light a fire under New Brunswick Housing Corporation. We need to get it working like it did before in its heyday, when it really drove the development of affordable housing, made sure that we had an adequate supply back in the 70s and 80s. It was done once, we can do it again, and the need is, if anything, greater today than it was then. We think that it's absolutely essential that there be an urban housing strategy with targets to hold us to achieve in our cities. We need to treat our major cities as the drivers of economic development that they are in this province, and end what, after 10 years in the legislature, I see as kind of a bias against our cities in decision-making, and that's got to stop. We've got to treat our cities appropriately, and we've got to treat our rural areas appropriately, and actually, we're not doing either well. I want to say that in terms of affordable housing, one of the novel things that we would do is alter the property assessment system for rental units, so that those rental units, so that the property assessment will be significantly set as based on the income, the rental income from those properties, from those rental properties. So if you have a rental property offering low rent, affordable rent, then the property assessment will be low, the taxation will be low, which would reduce that percentage of their overall operating costs and help drive development of affordable housing in the commercial sector as well. With a luxury building, the property assessments would be higher because the rental income would be higher, and therefore they would pay a higher level of tax. Of course, we would join Nova Scotia and PEI in ensuring that the PST is removed for a while from both the construction or the renovation and repurposing of affordable rental properties. That is a commitment I made in the legislature, and I want to see it happen, and I would deliver on that. Is that 2 minutes? Excellent. On social needs, in 2 minutes, but we're going to have lots of time for questions. I would say a couple of things. One, our party would support the development of a downtown community health center for vulnerable populations in the city that would include the homeless community in the city. Ideally, it would be a partnership between Vitalité and the University of Moncton, or Horizon Vitalité and the University of Moncton. I've seen it work in Fredericton so well. That downtown community health center has served the population well and has made a huge difference in people's lives. So that's an important one for us. I would have MB Housing build public critical complex care housing for those folks who are difficult to house. My riding office is right downtown in the core of Fredericton, and so I have lots of folks coming in to seek help who are homeless. That's a regular occurrence. And I know there are some people that are very hard to help lots of people, but they're very hard to help. So we need that kind of critical complex care housing, and we need to address the significant underlying causes of homelessness, which is mental illness and trauma. And that means providing an access to free mental health counseling and psychotherapy where it's necessary and will make a difference for folks to address those things. We need to increase for sure the rehab beds for addictions, but it's no good to go through rehab and then end up back on your addiction because of your underlying problems, your mental illness, the trauma you've suffered. And let me tell you before the final alarm rings that 50% almost of people who are homeless today first experienced homelessness in their 20s. In their 20s, 30% of those leaving foster care or group homes become homeless. So we need to tackle that part of the population to reduce the numbers of people entering homelessness in the first place. But it's housing and mental health care to help alleviate that problem. So just in quick closing, a government led by me will be collaborative at the cabinet level, collaborative with the caucus, collaborative across party lines, as we were during the minority government, with some significant success. And we're dedicated to rebuilding trust between the people and their government, which is desperately needed, but starts with respecting everybody but succeeds through action, not words. Thanks very much. Merci beaucoup.
Thank you. So we will follow your lead and we'll start with fiscal reform. Councillor Leger.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Is it up?
Yeah. Yeah. You can hear me?
I can.
Oh, very good. Thank you. So thank you for your comments. And you touched on some of the aspects of the municipal reform that we were very interested in. I'd like you to comment, if you could, as well as the property tax that you mentioned. What about the concept of a percentage of HST transferred to the municipalities? And also, would you be open to a new model for the equalization formula?
So on your second question, yes, we need a new model for the equalization formula because it's not working for anybody really. And it needs to achieve the goals that are set for it. So yes, absolutely. We need to restructure that and turn it into something that's going to work. As far as the 1 point off the HST, to transfer that to municipalities, my hesitation is this. We have to make a generational investment in fixing our healthcare system. It's crumbling, it's falling apart, and our staff and patients are paying the price. So we need to be able to ensure that we can make that generational investment. And I'm prepared to go into deficit short term if that's what we need to make that generational investment, because there is nothing more important than healthcare. We don't have a healthcare system that is serving people. People are going to continue to die and suffer, and our staff are going to continue to leave and work in other provinces or get out of the profession altogether. So we've got to do that. So that's what gives me pause on that proposal. So I'm open to talking about it once we get it, got into the books and see what's going on. Certainly worth having it on the table for discussion, because we do firmly believe that municipalities have to have a broader source of income beyond property taxes that's consistent and long-term, and that their income on property taxes needs to be improved. So that's a point of discussion. I threw out at a meeting of the New Brunswick Municipalities Association, I think, it was the idea of looking at what about a point off the income tax, and everyone groaned when I said that. So, I don't know, but I'm an idea guy. And at this point, right? So I haven't got all the information in front of me to say whether that's a good or a bad idea, or whether we could afford the 1%, because it's $225 or so million a year, which would move out of the provincial revenue into municipal revenue. So it's still public revenue. I get that. And maybe depending on the partnership arrangements between the municipalities and the province on delivery of services, maybe that could make sense, but that's open for discussion.
Well, thank you. And I think you're recognizing the fiscal challenges that municipalities have, and I think that's really important. So I appreciate the willingness to consider that, and certainly that will be on the table.
Absolutely. When our chief of police in Fredericton tells me they can't afford to do community policing like once was done, given the security and safety issues in all of our cities, I say there needs to be better support for our cities and municipalities to ensure that kind of service is there.
Thank you. Moving on to housing, Councillor Bourgeois. I think.
Oui.
Oui.
Bien sûr. Parlez proche à la micro. Oui.
I think you need to speak a bit closer to the mic. Can you hear me now? Okay, so there's not enough housing. There's not enough affordable housing either. If you were to be at the helm of government, would you eliminate taxes on unoccupied residential properties? Well, no. I think of the proposal to modify the tax system, the property tax system, and the way of determining the value of properties for apartments, for example.
The taille de la revenue
I think that using the size of the revenue is the way to go. It's a very important element of the solution because this would accelerate development of affordable housing. Because in the end, property tax would be lower for business owners who own affordable housing apartments. So the double tax right now, it's not double, it's lower, but because of all the requests for budget, we know that we need to improve public services in New Brunswick at different parts in the province. So I would say no. Okay, you've already talked a little bit about the strategy for housing for all, but I have a specific question for you. Would your government reduce delays or would it reduce timelines for the strategy, and would it increase funding for affordable housing? Absolutely. As I have said, it is important to urgently act here, and we need a reasonable budget to do so. In order to ensure affordable housing, we need to work with partners as well, different organizations, not-for-profits, co-ops, and so on and so forth. So yes, funding must be there. And there's also the speed at which Housing NB needs to act. They need to really speed up their work, and they need to speed up greatly. Our downtown area has about 33% of parking spots, so flat, uniform parking lots without different floors. Would you allow our municipality to have additional taxes on underdeveloped parking lots, for example? Absolutely, that is a great idea. If I think of St. John, for example, in their downtown, it's not acceptable if we look at what happened there in the past. So I think that, yes, it is absolutely a good idea to have additional taxes on these underused lots. So yes, I would support that municipalities that do that to encourage development. Two more questions now. Would you have legislation for short-term rentals to regulate this? And would this have a interesting tax framework for municipalities? Yes, in our current programming, it's something that exists. We will be launching our platform in a few weeks. We will be releasing it, but it is certainly part of our platform. Okay, here's the last question.
Subsidized housing units in the city, Lewis Street, Auburn Circle, Joyce Avenue, and others. Unfortunately, these 7 units are all segregated units. That model was abandoned 50 years ago, and yet we still have them today. The city recently established a committee with Rising Tide and NB Housing to explore how to transform the 7 units into mixed or integrated housing developments. Unfortunately, NB Housing cannot collaborate in this effort unless it owns all new units. The province is thus maintaining the unacceptable, abandoned, antiquated, segregated model. Question, will you change the rules governing NB Housing to allow it to integrate its 7 units in Moncton as soon as possible?
Yeah, not just in Moncton, but yes. I mean, we know today in 2024 that you need to have mixed housing. The segregation is not a good approach. It has to be done properly because I saw them relax the rules in the wrong way in Fredericton and in a seniors, public housing for seniors. And created a lot of security problems and so on. But I am confident that it can be done properly with the right rules. to bring people back together in greater diversity within public housing. The idea of projects, housing projects of the past, don't fit with today's reality. And it's going to be better if done well. Will be the better for everybody all around. Absolutely. Dan?
Thank you. Next up, social issues. And Councillor Crossman, I have you up first.
Thank you, Your Worship. Thanks for your presentation. Thanks for being here today. I guess your comments with regards to the previous, I really would have liked to chime in on, so maybe we can have a discussion offline on that. But the questions that I'm going to ask you today, have you seen these questions prior to us asking them?
I don't know if I've seen your questions. I've seen the
Okay.
briefing documents
Just
that
the briefing
the
document.
mayor's
Okay,
office sent
that's
me.
great. Good. Thank you. Okay, so this will be a surprise. Okay, great. Will you commit to building an inpatient stabilization and rehab center in Moncton for the most acute cases of mental health and addiction?
I did see that actually, and I didn't quite understand what that all entailed. But if it's something like I was talking about with respect to building critical complex care housing to move people into, then if that's how it aligns, I mean, critical care complex housing is what's been done significantly in British Columbia and Vancouver. It's worked very well. People who are hard to house are housed 24/7 wraparound services. And we don't really have much of that at all. And so if it sounds like they're similar, but maybe there's some differences you're thinking about.
Okay, great.
I think I have Councillor Kingston up next. For the
Okay,
next
perfect.
question.
Thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you, Madame Addis. Welcome, David, to Moncton. We wear this every day as a municipal council. David, as you know, in the major cities, city spends millions yearly, but really not our jurisdiction. But we're here on ground level fighting the battles with help from our provincial partners. So you've seen all the stats. Moncton has more than St. John and Fredericton combined in terms of homeless people. And I guess it reflects, I think, Councillor Crossman's question a little bit, committing to providing the necessary funding and support for an in-community rehab and stabilization wraparound services, which we badly need here in the city.
Yeah, well, yes, that's needed, and we would support that, no question about it. Again, I'm really kind of fond of this critical complex care housing model, and if that can accommodate that as well, that would be great. Like I said, I know as an MLA with a downtown constituency and my office kind of in the heart of it, unlike Jean Chrétien, I actually do talk to people who are homeless regularly, if you remember that old story. Anyway, and try and do what I can to support them. And there's some tough cases, but we've got to remember that they're people. They're people's sons and daughters and mothers and fathers. I had a guy came in who turned out to be the father of a young woman I knew. I had no idea so we need to treat everyone as people, treat people compassionately, and provide them with the supports they're going to work for them. But we need to, it's like 12 neighbors, and I know Moncton is thinking about, or has kind of got something going like that, but 12 neighbors in Fredericton. The approach there was really to try and meet people where they're at and find out where they want to go and see how they can support them. That's not for the people who are most difficult to house. I think that's what you're talking about and what I'm talking about with the critical complex care housing. But people, there isn't a part of the homeless population that needs that critical care, and let's provide it. And we can talk about, the details about how best to do it. It's needed. So yes, we would support it. This isn't forced, but in the end, everyone does want wants housing. Everyone wants housing, and everyone wants to get better. And we need to provide those services to enable both of those things to happen.
Terrific.
Thank you, David. Thank you, Madame Addis.
Deputy Mayor Thériault.
Merci, Madame la Mairesse. Bonsoir.
Thank you very much, Your Worship, and good evening to you. As you know, social issues is a file that is not of municipal jurisdiction. However, it's unfortunately something that we need to work on, as you know. Would you take on the first responsibility of care and for reducing the number of people living in homelessness in our communities? You will know that we have very high numbers. Yes, it is certainly a provincial responsibility. So we have to think of solutions that do not exist right now in order to do what is necessary to tackle these challenges that exist in our cities. Yes, absolutely. It is a provincial jurisdiction and responsibility. Now, if we think of the structure of the Department of Social Services, it's not quite acceptable right now in order to make the changes that are needed. So I would change the structure of social development. And because right now there are 4 big regions in New Brunswick, according to that department, and it's not acceptable. We need to have different regions in social development, and it needs to be to scale. It needs to be at a scale where we can work efficiently in every corner of the province, like one region for Moncton, for example. This structure that exists right now is at an unacceptable scale. So if we had regions at a smaller scale, it would be easier to ensure that the provincial government can really become an acceptable partner for the city of Moncton and for other cities in New Brunswick. Leadership, however, must remain within the department and the minister.
Councillor Butler to bring us home on community safety in 4 minutes.
Wow, 4 minutes. Well, thank you, David, and also to your candidates, and also for everybody to come out to listen tonight. Community safety, your first 10 minutes went quick and didn't really get a chance to speak on it, but we as the city of Moncton have the highest, according to Stats Canada, 3rd highest crime rate in the country. From 2021 to 2023, our policing increased by 40%. We had to start a new program called Community Safety Officers, and that cost us 230%. So, it's costing a lot. One of the things that we ask for any government that's coming to power is to please have a look at the Police Act, that we need community safety officers to have more power. We can't expect our policing, the RCMP or city police or whatever you have, to carry the whole load. You have to change. Everybody has to have a little bit of power. And I think it's very important that community safety officers, not bylaw officers, but we're talking about community safety officers, have a little bit more training, but also a little bit more power that they can perform. The next thing is the establishment of a mental health court here in Moncton. I realize there's some stipulations to that they have to have a residence and things like that, but I think that with us, we have a lot of mental health and addicted people in the city of Moncton that causes about 80% of our crime or the calls for service from fire, ambulance, police. And we have to have some way to deal with this as the rule of law. You just can't keep breaking the law and say, well, I'm mentally ill or I have an addiction, I have no home address. There's still got to be some type of care to be given to them. And I think mental health court would do that. My third question, and I'm trying to get through fast because the mayor gave me 4 minutes, but the next one is, even with our provincial jails and federal jails, we have to have a better exit strategy when they come out. They come out onto the streets, 2 years less a day, that's provincial. 2 years, more than 2 years plus a day, you go to federal. But when they come out, they come onto our streets with no education, with no place to live sometimes, and then they're right back into the same thing. So that old saying, if you're an alcoholic, you shouldn't own a tavern. So these people are getting out of jail, they're going right back to where they have come from, and there's nothing to give them to help them over that bridge. So there would be the questions that we would look for.
Okay, thank you. So on the community safety officers, yes, as long as the training, which goes hand in hand with that, is appropriate.
Well, it would be our liability, so we'd pretty well.
Yeah. So, but I think as province, we need to, if we're going to modify the act, I can imagine the debate right now in the Legislative Assembly. The training needs to be sufficient to make that appropriate. But with the appropriate training, I don't see why something like that couldn't happen. With respect to, one of the things that we are committed to is turning our essentially creating a 24/7 first responder system on mental health. So we have mental health response teams now that they work with the police, but they don't work 24/7. And the police, talking to the police in Fredericton, the chief in Fredericton, who I meet pretty regularly, he says this is a problem. When we've got them, it's great, but we need them 24/7. So I'm saying let's create a 24/7 mental health response team to work with the police to deal with a significant number of those cases. The efforts in St. John, the efforts in Moncton, and I'm not sure about Moncton, but Fredericton have worked well, but we need 24/7. And on the provincial jails, so here's the thing. What an opportunity, in a way, when people in provincial jails are essentially in the care, let's say, of the province. The opportunity to set up a pathway for those who leave jail to help them move in new directions. Housing, that'll be the first one. Get them housed coming out of jail. And then deal with whether it's mental illness, drug rehab, trauma, or whatever. But we need to have the institutional capacity to do that. It doesn't exist currently in government at any level, but provincially we need to have the capacity put in place institutionally to actually ensure that those coming out of jail have those supports at that point and before, actually, when they're still incarcerated, so that there's an opportunity to help them move forward in a new way. And that's going to require some expertise, some resources, and the right people. But there's a tremendous opportunity right there that we're missing.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much for being here tonight. Thank you for your service, and thank you to the candidates for stepping up.
Thank you very much. Merci beaucoup.
Est-ce qu'il y a assez de place pour tout le monde?
Does it work for everybody? Good afternoon and welcome to the Avenir Center.
Public session of Moncton City Council. It's not every day that we and the citizens of our city get to, have such a great view, but also to hear from you on the issues that really concern us. Alors ce soir, nous voulons discuter.
So tonight we want to address municipal tax reform, housing, social needs, and community safety.
10 short minutes. You will get a warning at 8 minutes with 2 remaining, and we will leave the final 20 minutes for questions from council. So the floor is yours. Take it away.
Thank you very much, Mayor. Merci tout le monde pour
Thank you everyone for giving me the opportunity to give you a presentation on our ideas and our solution.
the team here to speak with you and to speak to your priorities and to give you a sense of what a Holt government would be like as a partner for the city of Moncton. So we really appreciate the opportunity. Particularly, I mean, Moncton Council has tackled some really challenging things in the last number of years, and you've done it in a way that's inspiring, that I think has inspired us because it's been about partnership and collaboration. Vous êtes déterminé de vraiment.
You are committed to be connected to complex and complicated issues, and you work in a collaborative manner, which is quite impressive. This will come back later in my speech today. I particularly appreciate what you've done in some very complex files over the past few years.
So the first thing that I want to talk about in terms of our approach is that it is a team approach. I am the fortunate one that gets to stand here, but I have incredible people on our team who care for this city deeply, who know this city well, and who bring amazing experience and perspective to our work. So much of what I say here today has been informed by their knowledge of your community and their commitment to it. So I want to take a moment to introduce the team to you, if that's all right. I'm going to start on my left. We have our candidate for Moncton Northwest, Tanya Sodi. Après, on a la candidate pour
After that, we have our candidate for Chandray-Irishtown, Lise Chantal Boudreau. So I figure you know your potential representatives for Shediac-Apacadie, former mayor of Shediac, and spokesperson for the local government, Jacques Leblanc. On this side, we have someone that I'm pretty sure you know quite well, former Moncton City Councillor and former representative for Moncton Centre, Robert Key.
Alexandre Cédric Doucette. And on the far side, our candidate for Moncton South, Claire Johnson. So I'm really, really proud to have recruited these amazing people to our team. We think the work of government is a work of partnership in community, and it's these folks that are going to be in community working with you and bridging the gap between municipal and provincial politics. So je vais commencer avec le changement que vous pouvez.
Let's start with the elephant in the room, the main change you can imagine with the whole government. So you would start with a change of leadership style. Our style is based on collaboration.
Centralizing the work of government. There's too much that happens in Fredericton, in Chancery Place, by civil servants who often aren't allowed out of the office. And Serge is smiling because he knows well he was one and we were there together. And so those aren't decisions being made on the ground in Moncton, but they impact Moncton. We get inspired by the slogan that we see from the disability community about nothing about us without us. We believe that the next government needs to flip the model and get out of Fredericton and have community-led, government-supported initiatives. So for us, your priority is our priority. C'est votre priorité devrait être la priorité du gouvernement provincial.
Your priorities should be the priorities of the provincial government. It's not our job to tell you where to put a school, where to build priority infrastructure. You are here on the ground, you are the boots on the ground, and you are the ones who know the needs.
Place to put a school, you know best where to put the school, and you need a partner that's going to recognize that that is your expertise. And when you say something's your priority number one, it should be the provincial government's priority number one for your community. That's what you'll get from a whole team. Municipalities are better equipped to deliver results on the ground efficiently. You're closer to the people, and we need to give you the tools to do that. We need to give you the authority and the fiscal means to do that. So I'm glad we're going to tackle municipal reform first, because our team has been committed to municipal reform from the beginning. In fact, we thought it should have been done from the beginning, hand in hand with broader municipal reform, because the government dumped responsibilities and services on you without giving you the means to deliver against them. So our team is committed to a new fiscal framework, to a new funding formula that gives you the tools, the authority, and the money to fuel the growth and tackle the challenges that you're facing. C'est quelque chose qu'on pense que c'est.
It is something that's a priority for us. You need to have the resources and the tools to live up to the responsibilities that you've been given with a new fiscal arrangement. So for sure, it will be more tax revenue.
The challenges challenges that you're going to face. So yes, we are on board with municipal fiscal reform and doing it as quickly as possible. Yes, we are on board with the property tax assessment legislation and the changes that need to be made there. We actually want to do a complete overhaul of the property tax system, because I shouldn't say just, but transferring one piece of tax today that isn't appropriately assessed or appropriately taxed to get a Band-Aid solution in place, we don't think that that's the right thing for the long term. We believe that we need to really overhaul our assessment process. We need to overhaul the property tax system, the categories that exist, the way that they're coupled. All of that needs to change so that our property tax system is a tool that drives the community that we want. It should incentivize the kind of development that we want to see. It should push us towards density and diversity. Alors pour nous autres, cette réforme des impôts.
So for us, we need to, this property tax reform is a number one priority. We need to have a competitive system that's transparent, that's accountable, and it also needs to be a system that's predictable. You should know what you're going to pay in property tax before you receive your bills.
Transparent and understandable for everyone. It needs to be fair and affordable, and it has to move us forward toward the kind of society that we want to have. So that's something that we're really excited to tackle, and to tackle quickly. It's work our team has already been doing. We've identified folks from municipalities, CAOs and others that want to be part of it. We're going to hit the ground running so that we can make it happen quickly. Within the first 6 months, the new model should be identified so that we can operationalize it before the next tax bills come out. And we are open to the idea of an interim payment or adjustment for the fiscal year, where we can't in November rebuild the tax system and have that impact the bills in December. We could do something for 2025 as an interim measure before we roll out a new model come the end of the year that impacts the bills people will receive in January. Alors, je vais parler de logement parce que I don't have a timer here, so I'm just...
Moving on to housing now. Housing is a priority issue. Everybody's aware of that. The lack of affordable housing in New Brunswick is a big challenge. There are many different things that I'd like to address in this file, but because I only have 10 minutes, first I'd like to say that the whole government would eliminate the provincial part of the harmonized sales tax for development of new housing.
We are supportive of making the changes needed to allow for integrated housing, of addressing the Community Planning Act and the pieces that you want to see the authority transferred locally. That's 2 minutes? Okay, I'm going to go fast. And the point referenced around short-term rentals, we're totally prepared to be a partner on that. The next one was your social needs, and this is something that a number of members of my team are really passionate about. You'll be familiar with the fact that we have advocated for a mental health court time and time again. Rob has done amazing work in the Legislative Assembly pushing for that mental health court to be in Moncton, so we are committed to that. On est aligné avec le besoin.
We are pretty much aligned with the idea of having residential mental health treatment within the community so people can receive the services they need in a timely fashion. It should not take 4 to 5 years to be able to obtain a bed. And we also want to work in partnership with post-secondary institutions to train the people who are going to be able to deliver those services and this care in cooperation with community services. There are some initiatives that have been developed with the University of Moncton, community colleges.
Absolutely here to partner with you on changes to the Police Act so that you can serve your residents the way that you need to, because municipalities deserve more. You deserve to have a provincial partner that's coming alongside you, not above you, top down, but alongside you to take your priorities and make them theirs and figure out how that government can support community-led solutions, government-supported, where we give you the tools to decide how you're going to grow your community. We give you the fiscal room to serve the people as you do best, efficiently on the ground and the closest to them. So our government is going to be that decentralized partner that tailors solutions to your needs, because the needs in Moncton are different from the needs in Memramcook. We've got to stop doing one-size-fits-all policy making that happens in Fredericton, and we've got to leverage our local skills and local knowledge to deliver solutions that really meet your needs. Alors, nous autres sommes ici pour être ce partenaire.
So we are here to be your provincial partner, to be able to listen, to make your number one priorities our number one priorities. Thank you very much.
Would you like to ask a fiscal reform question?
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much.
Great to hear the commitment to that, and also seem to feel that the partnership with municipalities would be stronger under your government. I'm wondering though, for some clarity with respect to municipalities, as you know, financially, we struggle at times with respect to being able to provide many services that we're not mandated to provide, but we do them. And so wondering with respect to the provincial tax on residential properties, for example, or even a percentage of HST, could that be returned to municipalities to help us? You said you were going to look at completely revamping, whether it be the assessments and so on. But to take a look at that. And lastly, your thoughts on the equalization formula. And it may not necessarily be as important in Moncton because of the growth, but it is in other municipalities. And how would you, I guess, deal with that and help out the municipalities?
Yeah. Thanks, Charles. I appreciate the question. Our goal is to make sure that the City of Moncton has the tools and the funds it needs to deliver all of the services you need to your residents. So figuring out what that right category is, because we're going to be overhauling the property tax system and introducing not just residential, commercial, and industrial, but probably new categories of tax and new rates at which they'll be applied, which means the amount of money coming in is sort of different from what it is today. Then we have to transfer that money to municipalities to meet your needs and make sure that we are meeting your needs. So determining which ones cover the need, I think that we can do together. The goal is to make sure your needs are met. And if it's this one and this one and that one, and that's what gets transferred over, excellent. If I told you today it's going to be the residential tax, and then we change how we do residential tax and non-owner occupied and light industrial and others, and that figure changes, and all of a sudden there's a shortfall because it doesn't meet what you need. I'd like us to develop that together, because the goal is that you have the fiscal room to serve your residents, and we want to put in place a solution to do that. The mention of HST is an interesting one, because you know it's in the news these days that that there's $450 million that are going to come out of the provincial revenues. I think our entire platform is not going to cost $450 million. So we think there's a lot of things that we can do with the property tax system to deliver you the means that you need to solve your problems. And if it isn't sufficient, then we figure out the next pieces.
Thank you very much.
There was a second piece to your question there.
Equalization.
Thank you. Well, we definitely need a formula that is clear, fair, transparent. It's this trick between not one size fits all, recognizing the differences in between municipalities and needs and means and that sort of thing. So we have to work something out. But honestly, the Union of Municipalities has done some great work here. They have a team of people who have put together a proposal that is sound and based in a lot of good work on the ground and input from municipalities. So I think that advice and recommended new way forward is ready to be adopted.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor Bourgeois on housing.
Merci, Madame la Maire. Merci, Madame Holt.
Thank you, Your Worship. Thank you, Ms. Holt. I have 5 questions for you, but you've already answered some of them, so I will skip those. Thanks for recognizing the lack of housing and affordable housing more specifically. First question. We have about 1/3 of the downtown core area that's covered by single level parking spaces. We'd like to get rid of that to allow for high density housing units to be built. Would you allow our city to charge specific taxes on underdeveloped properties in the downtown core area? I think it's a very interesting idea, because during our first meeting with the mayor, she mentioned that issue at the time. And she even showed us through the windows of her office the amount of parking spaces in the downtown area in Moncton. So when you're looking for opportunities to develop housing where you can walk everywhere, you don't need all those parking spaces. and all those parking lots. You can live in a more sustainable manner. So it is a very interesting idea. It's a very interesting project. And we are very open to hearing about creative new ideas to address the issue. We need to figure out what we need to do on our end to give you the flexibility you need to create incentives for development of housing buildings. If there's land or property that is not developed to its fullest potential. Right now, the system encourages property owners to leave land vacant and underdeveloped. That's where the problem is.
Mais pour nous autres, on veut un
So we want to change that. We want to be productive. And if we have farmlands, we should use them. If we have property that allows for building housing buildings, high density housing buildings, well, we should use them. So your proposals in that respect, we're very open to them, and we would gladly listen to you in that respect. Thank you. Second question. Would you reduce wait lists in the Housing for All strategy, and would you increase funding to beef up that strategy? Well, there's a lot we want to do in terms of this Housing for All strategy, because there's a lot of red tape. There's a lot of people that were hired in the team, but they don't even use the budget that they're allocated. So, and we know that we are experiencing a housing crisis. We need to act urgently. I think last year there was $29 million of foregone funds in their budget. They didn't use those 29 millions. They took their time to set up a team, but they didn't do anything on the ground. When there's projects that are ready to receive the green light, they had a provincial partner, they had a federal partner. So yes, we want things move faster, for sure. And we need to reduce red tape that prevents projects from coming to fruition. We know that things are going to move in the capital, but we need to do what's necessary to attract the projects that we want to see in our cities. Next question. Are you favorable to legislation preventing or administering short-term rentals? Yes, I mentioned it very quickly at the end of my speech. We are very open to that. We want to legislate short-term rentals. In St. Andrews, something very promising was done in that respect, and there's other examples of such initiatives in other provinces where they try to find creative new ways of managing the community to find a balance between people who need housing and people who want to rent short-term housing. So if you have a solution, if you have something that's a balanced approach, we are here to listen to it as an equal partner. So that's an option for the municipality. Thank you. Last question.
Owns 7 segregated units, housing units in the city. Lewis Street, Auburn Circle, Joyce Street, there's 7 of them. Unfortunately, these 7 units are all segregated housing. This model was abandoned 50 years ago. We no longer do that, but those 7 units remain. The City of Moncton recently established a committee with Rising Tide and NB Housing to explore how to transform the 7 units from segregated to integrated or mixed housing developments. But unfortunately, NB Housing cannot collaborate in this effort unless it owns all of the units. The province thus is maintaining the unacceptable, abandoned, antiquated, segregated model. Question, will you change the rules governing NB Housing to allow it to integrate the 7 units in Moncton?
So I don't want to pretend to be an expert on those 7 units in that particular case. So I don't want to give anyone the wrong impression, but we are very interested in supporting integrated housing and a modernization of our rules around what can and can't be done, because we've seen this with a number of projects where people have come up with new and creative ways to provide a different kind of housing that maybe doesn't have a stove, but oh no, the provincial rules say if it doesn't have a stove, we can't support it, when it has communal food services that are perfect for that particular group of population that they're trying to serve, and supportive resources that come in to help manage. But our rules have always said you have to have a stove or else. And so we have to modernize those rules. We have to get rid of 50-year-old segregated solutions or archaic pieces of bureaucracy that restrict the diversity of development we need to serve the diverse needs of New Brunswickers that need to be housed. So we're really interested in figuring out what do we need to terminate or cancel or undo or change how it's written in order to support integrated housing opportunities. And if it's for those 7 specific units, then let's figure out what do I need to edit and what does it need to go through the Legislative Assembly in order to give the tools to deliver the kind of housing that Monktonians deserve.
Okay. Merci beaucoup. Merci, Madame la Maire.
Thank you. Councillor Crossman on social issues.
Thank you, Your Worship. Thank you for being here today. Good to see you, Rob, Alexandre, Claire, and Jacques. The other 2 candidates I don't know yet. One of them lives in my neighborhood, who I've asked to meet with, but I haven't had a chance to meet with yet. So it would be very interesting because I have a pretty good understanding of what's going on in the municipal world. So my question to you is basically, and the Deputy Mayor Theriault is going to have the key question later on to ask you. But tonight, can you confirm that you would commit to building an inpatient stabilization and rehab center in Moncton for the most acute cases of mental health and addiction? Because we all understand that mental health and addiction is what's basically taking over the streets of Moncton right now. And that responsibility, as we know, lies with not the city of Moncton, relies with the province, but so on and so forth. So I'm not sure what that would look like, but I'd like to know your party's position on a rehab center and stabilization. And we talk about the most acute, but the most acute, there's people that also need help that are not the most acute, right? So, I mean, there's different levels of homelessness, there's different levels of addiction and mental health. So if you could answer that, that would be great. Thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you, Councillor Crossman. That's a big question because there are a lot of people who need a lot of help and a lot of different kinds of help. So in the first instance, we are absolutely committed to having more residential treatment opportunities in Moncton. And there's very specific words that you use there in terms of inpatient facilities for acute folks. And so I don't know if that definition and our idea of residential treatments, if they marry, because this was the first time I had heard that expression. So I want to make sure I understand what technicalities are attached to that definition. But our broad goal is to make sure there are places where people can get that kind of 24/7 residential supported treatment in this community. And then we also have to look at the stages as you move out from there. So I talked about having the kind of people who can support in community in partnership with our organizations that are sort of housing these people on a temporary basis in different forms of shelter across the city. We have to look even further upstream at how we are supporting kids in school with access to mental health. We know that the number of guidance counselors and school psychologists is really low, and kids are struggling to access mental health supports. And we know that people who find themselves experiencing homelessness often first started that at a young age in their 20s is common for people experiencing homelessness now. So we've got to get at the front end of it to try to address that while also offering those fully supported clinical environments to support people that are looking for a path to recovery and wanting that. And those environments may look a little different, right? There's a clinical environment A and clinical environment B, and the folks, you mentioned some of them, folks at Rising Tides, folks that we've worked with at different centers. You need different models to reach and support different people. So we have to have that full spectrum there, but we are committed to more residential beds that provide full support for someone to transition into recovery and then have access to the types of transitional housing and supportive housing and then autonomous housing as they move through that journey to then being eligible to work and ready to reintegrate completely.
Awesome. Councillor Kingston.
Thank you, Madam Addis. Welcome, Susan. Welcome. Good to see you again. And to follow up on Councillor Crosman's question, obviously they have nowhere to go at the bottom, at the end of the day, and that's a well-worn statement. The city has become home to the homeless, many of whom suffer again from mental health and addiction issues. And if anybody reads the newspapers, the Atlantic Downtowns Association recently came out, I think last week, with a public story saying they're basically pleading, asking, requesting all levels to help them get the hearts of the cities back, because it's the vibrant, beating heart of our city downtown. So the necessary funding is the question tonight, Mrs. Holt. Providing the necessary funding for an in-community rehab, it has other names, and wraparound services. Wraparound, of course, meaning mental health professionals to help out. That's the question. Will you support the funding on that?
Yeah, that's exactly the goal, is to provide you funding that lets you meet needs, and also to partner, like we say, with things like that residential treatment facilities, supporting the educational side of making sure the workforce are there. Things like mobile clinics that serve to provide support to folks who are in between stages on the journey. We almost need a SWAT team approach. It's almost like an EMO approach, right? You know, an emergency happens and the emergency measures organization kicks into gear and there's people there coordinating and everything is moving. The city of Moncton has taken steps to try to do that, to bring partners to the table, to put action groups together, to get all of the partners there, and hasn't had, I think, the partnership at the provincial level to drive these solutions all the way through to the end. So we are absolutely here to take that approach that this is a crisis. It needs emergency management with a SWAT team of folks that have the authority to cut through the red tape and the barriers and get the solutions moving faster than they normally would. We've all seen it, right? We've seen how long it's taken to get a residential treatment facility here in Moncton when that commitment to those beds was made years ago. And the time it's taken to go through an RFP and land acquisition and to look at, government's moving at a molasses pace. And if we were partnering with communities to allow that to happen, I know it would have happened a lot more quickly than it has now. So we need to make sure the right people are doing the right jobs, and that the government's role to take away the barriers and provide the funding to get those spaces and facilities in place. It's what we have to do to address a crisis that is now impacting downtowns, companies, workers, residents, and the health and well-being of our entire province.
We would expect all our MLAs in whichever party to support us on that because they live here, work here, and they're part of the dilemma as well. They're part of the process and the solution. So we certainly hope they're going to be supporting us on that in that way. Thank you, Madame Madas. Thank you, Susan.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor Theriault. No. Up is on.
Vous m'entendez?
Oui.
Donc, bonsoir. Merci d'avoir.
Can you hear me now? Oh, yes. Okay, good. Thank you so much for having accepted our invite, and a good evening to your team as well. I'm sure you know that social issues is not of municipal jurisdiction, but as you know, it has become a priority for our city. So on this question, would you assume the responsibility? Would you take on first responsibility for care and for reducing the number of unhoused people in our community? The responsibilities for care of New Brunswickers is, of course, of provincial jurisdiction. It is our responsibility to ensure that all citizens have access to care that they need, where they need it, and when they need it. That is absolutely a very important focus for us, and it's something that we hear every day. We need to completely transform our healthcare system. Hospitals can't do everything. But right now they are receiving all of the issues, people in mental health crises, people who are unhoused, people who are having personal crises. They all make their way to the hospitals because there are no community clinics right now who offer pluridisciplinary teams who could offer primary care or preventive care to the community. So that is a number one priority for us. We need to ensure that we have these clinics in our communities. Here in Moncton, for example, There is a clinic that has been promised. We've promised 30 primary care clinics in communities, and Moncton would certainly be receiving one of the first of these clinics. That is part of our platform. We wish to have 10 in the first year to ensure that we have room for the 180,000, is it? 180,000 New Brunswickers who don't have access to this type of care. And we would also wish to expand services so that everybody can have a place to turn to close to their home and that's open when they need it, whether these people are unhoused or not, because it is absolutely the provincial government's responsibility to do this type of work in partnership, of course, with the municipality to determine where the best place is. I'm sure there will be several of these clinics eventually, so where is the best position to have these and link with other community infrastructure? Because if we've seen that if we work with schools, that can be a good partnership, or that may or may not be a good partnership, whereas if you have them with other community services, that could be a better partnership. So we want to have healthy communities. We want to be able to ensure well-being for everybody. So picking a spot for this community clinic is a very important decision. Now we also need mental health counselors. So when we talk about pluridisciplinary teams, it's not just nurse practitioners and family doctors. We're talking about social workers as well, mental health advisors, people who can help patients, whatever their problem is, when they show up. So yes, this is a worldwide issue. It's not something we see only in New Brunswick. It's something we see everywhere. We need to put a lot more emphasis on prevention. Can you tell us a little bit about your ideas? Yes, in fact, there are two things I would like to bring up to really improve prevention. One is with regard to the community, because we need spaces, we need infrastructure for social, for recreation, whether it be for youth or for the elderly. We need this type of infrastructure to have an active and engaged population. This is really important in preventive care. And there's also a new program that we've announced with regard to food in school. And we think that this would be able, if we give meal to kids in school, that could help them, because so many kids show up at school, their backpack is empty, their lunchbox is empty, they don't have food in their belly. So if we can start feeding them, if we can start giving them healthy local meals, well, this will teach them good habits, they will be in better health, they'll be able to learn, they'll be able to better succeed in the school environment. And all of this leads to a healthier lifestyle and a longer life, because the Heart and Stroke Society, for example, they've been asking for this type of program, and different organizations have been saying that this is the best investment in preventive care. So feeding kids in school, that is absolutely something that our team wishes to do. So universal breakfasts in school, and there could be a voluntary contribution for lunch, and this would be in each and every school. Right now, a few schools offer it, but not everybody. And we want a universal system, a fair system, and we want to engage with the community, because we have so many not-for-profits in the community who already do this type of work with volunteers and fundraising. We think that all kids should have the opportunity to succeed in school, and also this can help families with affordability. There are several families who live in constant stress and who have affordability issues. They have to decide between paying for electricity or if they'll send their kids to school with a full belly. So that stress is not good for parents either. They find themselves in difficult situations. They need to make hard choices when it comes to their health and to feeding themselves. So our team is really proud to propose this solution that helps with affordability, and it helps with issues in school as well. There's a lot of stress right now with teachers as well. So we want to ensure well-being for all. We want these kids to be able to learn and to also develop good habits with eating well, eating locally. So this is preventative health, like you were talking about.
Again, you're squished in. I'm hoping you can do it in like 3 to 4 minutes.
Well, last time was 4, now I'm down to 3. Thank you, team. City of Moncton is going through a terrible time with crime rate. Stats Canada says between in 2021 that we were the 3rd highest in Canada. And that is not something that we're proud of. One of the things is that we have our RCMP costs have gone up 40% from 23.4 million to 32 million. We've had to hire more community safety officers to try to deal with the bylaw situation here in the city of Moncton, and that's gone up 230%. So we're really feeling it. So when you talk about the changes of the Police Act to empower our community safety officers, we really have to hold everybody to that commitment. We have to visit it, even if it's as a team that we sit down and go over it, to give them more. For sure, they'll need more training, more qualifications, but we still have to get to another level of policing. We can't depend, the cost of RCMP is just, well, you're hearing it all over the province, so it's not just from us. Also, well, you mentioned about the mental health court. I don't know, I'm a kind of a data guy, and I don't know how well that's worked in St. John. It was there for a while. I think it's shut down. I'm not sure, but I think that, it's a great thing to have, but we're going to have to change the rules and regulations to it, because if it's not working the way it is now, for sure. And also, my final one is the provincial correction centers, like 2 years less a day, they go to provincial jail. And when they're in there, we find a lot of them, as soon as they're getting out, they're just dropped off onto the streets, and we have to deal with them again. We go back to our 230% increase in community safety officers. But we have to, even in them 2 years less a day, we have to make sure that they can get their GED. It's important. Education is the most important thing that we can give to them. Job skills when they get out. Any other type of program that we can help them transport back to the community and try to give something instead of just falling back to where they were before. So please.
Thank you very much for, there's, I think, 3 questions in there, so I'm going to try to get at each of them if I can. And I appreciate how you started that Moncton is seeing the impacts of crime more than most communities in our province and in Canada. And you need the tools to be able to tackle this. And in some cases, you're prevented to doing so by legislation. So when I say we're committed to changing the Police Act, we absolutely are, because we cannot continue with the status quo. It's not working. We think we need to do a more comprehensive review of policing in New Brunswick. Some of that work's already underway, because different communities have different needs, and we're trying to do some blanket things or not allowing different local solutions, regional solutions, and others to take place. I know the situation in Moncton is quite unique with the direct contract with the RCMP, but as you say, the expenses and the reality on the ground of what you need from community policing is not enabled by that right now. So we've got to make sure that the Police Act reflects the right powers, the right resources to serve the challenges that you're facing in community. I want to talk about the mental health court for a minute, because the model in St. John actually has been working. So the reason why it paused was because the justice left who was trained in that model. And it took some time to find another justice who had the skills and the experience to deliver the model of a mental health court. But it results in much lower recidivism. It results in better outcomes for the community as well as that person, because you're bringing all the relevant people around the table to support the person with a solution that isn't just straight to 5 weeks or 5 days or 2 years minus a day in a facility in the province that might not do anything to address their mental health issues and the things that are causing them to offend. And so we've seen really positive results in St. John. That program is back up and running. And all data shows that the folks who experience a mental health court pathway are less likely to offend again, and it costs less to deliver that model. So we're really excited to put it in place in Moncton because the needs are great here. And it's a matter of having the right people available to do that. And the access to talent is a challenge. We have a shortage of people who have experience in social work and in mental health counseling and in this piece of the justice system. So we've got to make sure those people are there to deliver it because it is a better pathway than going through a traditional court system that is not cut out to handle people who are struggling with mental health crises. Now, the third point that you made was, oh gosh, this is something that we're seeing more and more is that people are essentially being released into homelessness, released into an environment where they're so much more likely to reuse and to offend because we have done virtually nothing to support or rehabilitate them. And I loved what you said about education because education is the great equalizer, right? It's the tool that gives folks a chance to go out and take a different path. But when you're dropped off at the gate with a garbage bag and no transportation, no place to live, maybe I've heard in some cases you're given a tent. We're not setting people up for success. And we need our system to learn from models. The federal model is a bit stronger. They start rehabilitation day one. And it's in partnership with people who know how to build that pathway. But they can't be, and we do this at our hospitals as well, right? People are discharged from hospitals into homelessness and back into those addiction environments. And so we have to have stronger supports in those environments before we release people to really vulnerable conditions.
Thank you very much for being here. Thank you for your service. Thank you to your candidates for stepping up and really appreciate all of your input.
Any one of these folks would have been happy to jump up and answer these questions as well because I have an incredible team. We really appreciate the opportunity to speak with you and everyone who's interested in this election. It's a really important election. I think there's a lot of changes to be made. I believe we have the team to do it. And I'm thrilled to have the opportunity to speak with you tonight. Merci beaucoup.
Thank you. Merci.
Well,
Good evening.
So at this time, we're just waiting for the premier. So any minute, he will be here. I see him coming. All right. Well, welcome. Merci d'être ici au centre.
Thank you very much for joining us here at the Avenir Center.
That our citizens have the opportunity to hear about the issues that are really important in our community that have, provincial responsibility. So we're really happy to have you here. Just to go over some of the ground rules tonight, we're hoping you can give us about 10 minutes. Actually, I'll give you an 8-minute warning on the topics that we'd like to discuss tonight, including fiscal reform, housing, social needs, and community safety. So, Mr. Premier, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Your Worship. Merci, bonsoir.
Thank you and good evening.
For the invitation, thank you for the opportunity. Before I start, I certainly would like to recognize my colleagues that are here with me today. So we have the Honorable Ernie Steeves from Moncton Northwest, Honorable Sherry Wilson from Albert Riverview, the Honorable Greg Turner, Moncton South, Paolo Andretti, Moncton East, David Melanson, Moncton Center, and I believe, no, he's not here, I don't think, Rob Weir, candidate for Riverview. And then we have René Vistillon, who's not here yet. Je vous remercie de m'avoir invité aujourd'hui.
I'd like to thank you for inviting me to speak to you tonight. When I prepared my notes for tonight, my approach was to speak directly on the different topics that you've brought up as priorities. So, for example, healthcare, education, housing, social needs, and so on and so forth.
You have to understand, and we all do appreciate that we're experiencing the pain of growth. We are experiencing growth in our province that we have never seen before. We have about 100,000 more citizens today in New Brunswick, gone from out of 760 to 860,000, and Moncton is certainly leading that way in the country. I think with the largest per capita increase in 2 years running now. So we're certainly seeing that in all areas. But through it all, I think I want to reference certainly where we are provincially. When we started we looked very closely at I remember one of the very first things we did was related to helping businesses and making it and looking at the WorkSafe situation where our WorkSafe premiums were $265, $100. They're now $1.18. The lowest east of Saskatchewan, I think lowest in the Maritimes by far, and allowing businesses able to operate easier and cheaper and more effectively, while at the same time protecting employees. So as you know, we've had 6 balanced budgets. And we will continue with that. So I think there hasn't been that record in this province for a long, long time. We went through cycles of governments for every 4 years, for 20 years. So this is the first time there's been some continuity. Mind you, our first year was in the flood. The second year, we get into the pandemic for 2 years, and then certainly got into rebuilding the province. So while most, people will talk about, well, Higgs, he's all about money. My goal is all about getting better results for the taxpayer's dollar. So when I talk about getting results, it's about how do I deliver them and how do we work together as a team to deliver them in each community and do it effectively. So when we talk about having a surplus, that has saved 90 million in interest payments this year alone. All that money has gone into the social services, into health, into education. In fact, we've had the largest increase in health budget in the history of the province. We're $1 billion more a year now than we were before. 2.9 to 3.9. So anyone that says, give me more money, put more money in health, it's going to get better, I would beg to differ. Doing health differently is going to get it better. And the priority for us right now, in addition, to maintaining and ensuring we're competitive with salaries for nurses and doctors, is an information management system. An information management system to identify our entire capabilities within our province, so we can work together to deliver the best healthcare. And when you look across the province, you say, how do we create a system where the patient first is a strategy? So a doctor who can't deliver service, maybe here in Moncton, maybe they could get it in Bathurst, maybe they could get it somewhere else in the province, and anywhere else could come here. It's the idea of knowing and having that information that can be utilized so the patient can carry from one jurisdiction to another as needed, but more importantly, to be dispatched to those jurisdictions in order to actually get a service in a timely manner. I also think we should get into a patient guarantee type of a program. And it's not good enough. And I want to use a little example, and I got to be careful here in terms of, it's not to identify any particular facility, but it's saying it was a case where a requirement was needed, and at the time it was told that, well, there wasn't an operating, room available to do the biopsy. And my question was, well, was there availability in a hospital 10 minutes or 20 minutes down the road, or 2 hours down the road, or 3 hours down the road? And there was a blank stare. So, you'd say if it was a critical care requirement, why would we not be using our entire network in order to deliver it? Because critical care should not wait. And that's where a managed system comes into play. And from the beginning, I've talked about managing services better. So it's an easy thing to tax more and spend more and say we're getting better because we're spending more. And from the very beginning of my foray into this, I've talked about results versus how much money's being spent. So I can talk about, we spent 35% more in health. We spent roughly the same in social services and education, about 32% more. And that's before our population has grown by 9 to 10,000 in our school systems. You mentioned in your report about the number of portables. How do you keep up the growth like we're seeing? And when you talk about buildings and saying, can we more, you've set the bar high here in terms of the number of projects on the go. But in relation to that, it's a case of how much more can we build? I've had builders tell me, the costs are so high because we don't have the skill sets and number of contractors to actually build more. And the ones that are bidding really high right now because the demand is so great. And that's the challenge that we are facing. But I mentioned today earlier, and I want to make this very clear, something else. So again, we will continue. The HST reduction is some way, again, to give everyone $1,000 as minimum tax reduction, tax relief, but also to look at that across the entire network. But yesterday we were told that we were going to receive 4,600 new asylum seekers. We have 400 in the province right now, and that has tripled in the last few years. Now, we were just told that by the Department of Immigration federally 2 days ago. And we went back and said, what are the details on that? Where are they coming from? And it looks like it's a new model. They've said that's going to be a proportional thing because Ontario and Quebec were complaining that they were having such an increase in asylum seekers. But what makes it even more dramatic is that these folks have not gone through any immigration assessment at this point. So we don't know whether they're legitimate or not legitimate. They've come into the country and here they are. There's no suggestion that there's going to be any resources follow that because the last increases there were not. But even if there were resources in terms of money, we don't have the capability to find housing to meet those needs. And so there lies a challenge, and we're pushing back on that right now in relation with working with the federal government and saying these folks need to go through the whole assessment process and understand, are these legitimate asylum seekers? Because we all have a compassion for helping people that need help, but we must understand the difference. And so it can't be just a simple download from the federal government. Now, we've experienced, lots of that. I know that as we've talked about the different aspects of the growth and expenses you've had here, you mentioned on your report about the security issue. We've hired 50, I think we're now at about 50, 60 new RCMP officers. You've doubled yours from up to 19. And we know what that issue is on the street. We know what the homeless situation is. We know what the drug situation is. We want visibility across the entire province into the, you know, there's illegal activities happen. There's a major drug bust here just recently. And so the focus that we have is on a mental health and addiction treatment program. You know, one that basically, if you're convicted or you're on the street, if you're in a situation where you can't help yourself, but you're a risk to others and yourself, then we find a compassionate care intervention program. You know, and I'm going to use an example here for me. Is in St. John back last winter. We had 2 fatalities from fires. And you know, it just, I called the father whose daughter was lost, 27 years old. Been in and out of treatment centers for some time. And, you know, of course, it was government's fault. And do we have the right services to deal with mental health addictions? Our hospitals are not equipped to do that. Can we move that right out of the hospital so we actually have mental health and addiction treatment centers? Can we say, you know, I can't just walk on by when someone's laying on the street corner and they're unconscious and it's freezing out and they can't even respond to me, let alone tell me yes or no? How do we find compassion in walking on by? So we're talking about a path that brings people to a long-term addiction recovery program, not a life on drugs. I don't think there's any safe heroin injection. We've made it very clear that we will not support new injection facilities. We'll assess with the communities, the existing ones, what impact are they having? Are they helping anyone? Are they hurting more people than they're helping? Are people getting better? Are we saving lives? Do we have another way? So we've been pretty clear that our focus is to make a difference and to make the decisions that make that difference. And the reason we're running 6 balanced budgets is because we've done that. We've demonstrated it. And we can talk about what others did, what opportunities we had in this province, but every province in the country did not manage through what we saw over the COVID, over the time, and at the same time manage through with maintaining a balanced budget and reducing taxes. We took about $370 million off of the taxes. So we have choices to make in this election. And the choice in this election is we can continue on a progress that is demonstrated. It's not hype. It's not, I don't have to sit here and make up stories about what we're going to do differently, what we're going to do better. I can tell you what the priorities are, and I can tell you what we're going to work on, the decisions we're going to make a difference. But you already know we're capable of making decisions. And we're not afraid to make decisions. And yes, it causes disruption. And that sounds like my bell's up. Is that it? So yeah, my bell's just been rung? Is that it? All right. Okay, fair enough.
Thank you. We'd like to give council the opportunity to ask some questions now. And first up is Councillor Leger on municipal fiscal reform.
Thank you very much, Mr. Premier. As you know, a lot of issues have arisen in the last number of years related, whether it's increased police costs, social costs, the things that we're seeing with homelessness. The monies that, for example, City Council awarded in the amount of $6 million that you as a provincial government matched for Rising Tide. But we're really struggling as municipalities, and that's across the province. And so it's important you began the municipal reform, and thank you for doing that. Now we're wondering with respect to the financial portion of the municipal reform, as we try to come to grips with the extra services that citizens are asking us to deliver that are really not something that the municipality is equipped nor responsible for. So we're wondering with respect to the notion of your party considering a transfer, for example, of property tax to the municipality, possibly a percentage of HST, and also would like to know, I guess, the commitment of if you're going to move towards financial reform, can that be done before January 1st, 2026? And finally, as part of that, there is a lot of discussion on the equalization formula. And depending on the municipality, it means more to some than others. And so it would be nice to maybe understand what your party can bring to support municipalities like Moncton and Fredericton and all the municipalities in New Brunswick with these challenges.
So fair enough, Councillor, and I did read the comments certainly in the Moncton Matters document, and I appreciate the challenges that we're facing in Moncton more so because of the population. I mean, I think the assessments that we've seen in property taxes, and I think that's brought revenue to every community. I think Moncton, it's about 30 million or something of that range. But this fiscal reform, what I want to say about that in this fiscal reform and analysis is everything is on the table. It is a full assessment of what it takes for a community to be self-sufficient. So we're not hiding behind something. We're not trying to push additional services on the communities. We know the challenges. I'd say in many ways you can lead the charge on this because you're seeing the challenges bigger than any community in the province. But we're feeling the same heat kind of everywhere in terms of the growth. So on the timeline for this, what we'd marked out is okay, and I was actually asking questions about, are we going to be able to expedite this in any way based on what your report had said? And so I know that I'm going to make an assumption that we continue and we're able to keep moving in the progress that we've seen and what the Brunswick is feeling. If that is the case, we'll be able to meet with the local government in November. And we'll be able to lay out the timelines right then of how fast we can move. Now, if we were able to make the difference and implement this, because I don't know to what extent it is, and you probably can tell me how some of the discussions maybe are going or if they're meeting your satisfaction now, but we would call legislation in early in order to do it early if we're ready with the facts and the details of what's required. So I can't, just say that arbitrarily. I have to say in November, if we find the path is clear, and what municipalities need. And I'd like to think that the negotiations and discussions will carry on with the bureaucrats all the while that we're out, so that we can hit the ground running and we can follow up on what we've been doing. Because, training wheels are gone. We don't need training wheels. We've been through this. And I've been through it for a while now. And the job never gets done. I appreciate that. But there's some huge issues that are going to impact the future of our province. Fiscal reform is one. Every region having self-sustainability, stability, and financially, and the regions all rising to have the same amenities throughout the province and the 12 different regions, so that people can move around our province and all municipalities can grow accordingly. So I don't know if that's the commitment you're hoping for, but I do believe that we would seriously look at it, and I say to the point where I'd call legislation early, but I can't say I'm optimistic that would happen. But I like to meet as many challenges as you're laying out there.
Well, thank you. In the realization that this is a huge priority for all municipalities, and certainly the earlier the better. And thank you for that commitment of wanting to move forward in November.
Absolutely.
So, thank you.
Merci. Au sujet de logement.
Thank you. Concerning housing, Councillor Bourgeois, thank you, Mr. Premier.
On housing, je vais poser les 4 premières en français.
The first ones will be asked in French.
La crise du logement.
There's a housing crisis. There's a shortage of housing. A minute, please. Do you want me to start again?
Okay.
Would you like me to start over? I can hear the interpretation. There's a housing crisis right now. There's a housing shortage because of population growth, and there's a shortage of affordable housing, and costs are rising. I have 5 questions for you. First question, would you eliminate property tax on residential property, unused residential property? And would you eliminate HST on multiple housing units like it was done in Nova Scotia and elsewhere?
No, I don't think so. I met with different builders, and I said, how many more units could you build if we took off the property tax PST on buildings? And I didn't get any commitment they could build more. I didn't get a commitment that money would flow to the tenants. And so the purpose was, okay, so what does it mean? What it means is $170 million in terms of revenue to the province. I'm getting some feedback there. And in relation to that, so we're focused on, okay, if builders know that the HST is actually going to be reduced, then they see that as a long-term and what it means to them in terms of their financing. But the other piece about that is the actual double tax consideration. Now, we started double tax reduction in 2012. It was canceled in 2014. We brought it back in 2018, and is no longer a double tax. It's a tax and a half. It's 1.5. So can we continue in doing that? We are now doing an assessment of where our taxation levels match up with like Nova Scotia, because I'm very interested in comparative analysis so that we're not disadvantaged. And that's in every category. Where can we best in class? And so would I do something there if I find that our numbers are out of whack for other jurisdictions that we're competing with and trying to maintain our, absolutely. But I at this point, that is not a budgetary item, but I would tell you that it's a consideration as we do comparators. And through this fiscal reform, I'm hoping there will be lots of comparators that we can use to learn from. But I would say our record on that was clear. We did deal with it. It was canceled. We brought it back, and we finished it at 1.5 until kind of we see where revenues land. And if I just could go on a little bit on where revenues land, what we're seeing on revenue side is HST spending. Discretionary spending in many cases, which is kind of surprising, with affordability issues. And on the affordability program we had only 25% of the people eligible that participated. And what it required was like a 5 or 10 minute application and a verification of your income from last year. And so it was surprising that it didn't have a higher take up. So with the HST spending, the idea is that, so we're seeing revenue kind of peak and we're saying, okay, is it starting to drop a little bit? Because if I think of Newfoundland, and I think of when the revenues on the offshore royalties were high, the Newfoundland bureaucratic spending in government just ballooned. Well, then all of a sudden, when the bottom dropped out of that, there they were, high and dry. We've been very careful, working with the Minister of Finance and going through these issues and saying, look, we don't want to get caught. And all of a sudden, the population looks at it and say, well, hold it, how did we get here? Well, it would get there from not matching up your revenue expectations with your expense recommendations. So we will be monitoring that as we go through the election. You won't see this. I mean, our big election commitment is making it cheaper for people to live here. And that's the reduction in the HST.
Deuxième question.
Ah oui.
Second question. About 1/3 of the downtown core in Moncton is covered by parking lots. In order to maximize the use of property in the downtown core, mostly to develop multi-dwelling units or high-density buildings, would you allow our city to charge a tax on underdeveloped land and properties, especially in the downtown core?
Interesting request. I read that in the, so would we consider that? Yes. And how would that work? I don't know. But I think that that would be very much dependent on what the municipality thought worked best for them, because I think that is something in municipal jurisdiction. And how can we aid that solution? So you tell me.
Okay. Merci. Troisième question.
Thank you. Third question. You have a housing for all strategy. Would you be open to reducing wait times with this strategy, and would you increase funding for affordable housing under this strategy?
The first part, I just didn't go clear in the first part.
You have a, what is it, affordable housing?
Affordable housing program, and would we, yes. Would we yes.
And the strategy has a lot of bureaucratic hurdles, and it's not as
streamlined as it should be.
Streamlined as
it
it should be, let's say.
Yeah.
But second part was, would you increase the funding for affordable housing within that strategy?
Merci pour la question en anglais pour moi. Yes, we would. There are roadblocks in that process, and we do need to move more quickly. And we've set up the first NB housing in 40 years. So it wasn't even in existence. And so it's moving too slow for me too. And I think that there is a way, both on the permitting side, with the municipality and the side in government of moving forward with subsidies. Because what we're seeing, and I guess here lies kind of again, trying to map out the path. So what we're seem to be is that, and you know, builders were telling me there's a sweet spot, and it could be obviously different in different municipalities. But the sweet spot where people will pay a certain rent, and then if it goes over that, they can't rent them, and they're seeing higher vacancies. Now, we're not at a level where we got a lot of vacancies right now, and certainly not here. But I guess the point is, if we are able to build enough to get the vacancies, and we're on that hump where we've got, you know, places 2 and 3 years out, 1 year out to come online, then it's a case where rent will come down because vacancies will go up. But would we subsidize in the meantime to make it affordable? Because affordable housing is our challenge. And those units that people had and lived in, and some on the homeless right now, are because they simply couldn't afford to be there. And so there's a balance of, okay, who's on the street? Why are they on the street? And then when we find people that just couldn't afford to live in their home, and some of the rules and regulations we've made on different dwellings, I think, within the municipalities, it's like, how do we make that better? And that includes a subsidized program for affordable housing.
OK. 2 autres questions. Est-ce que vous adopteriez une loi régissant la location?
Would you support legislation to control short-term rentals, including a tax system that would be beneficial for municipalities?
Kind of like an Airbnb kind of discussion, right? And so I did ask a few questions about that when I read this comment. And I think we do need to look at that. I really think that should be part of the fiscal reform. It should be understood. How big an issue is that? What is the concern, and how much of a loss is it for businesses that are competing? So there is a need to address kind of a new situation that didn't exist 10 years ago.
Okay. Final question in English.
Not necessarily.
But this needs a little brief introduction. The province owns 7 subsidized housing units in the city, such as the Lewis Street, Auburn Circle, and Joyce Avenue. Unfortunately, these 7 units are all segregated housing units. That model was abandoned 50 years ago. The City of Moncton recently established a committee with Rising Tide and the New Brunswick Housing to explore how to transform the 7 units from segregated developments to integrated or mixed developments. Unfortunately, NB Housing cannot collaborate in this effort unless it owns the units. The province is thus maintaining the unacceptable, abandoned, antiquated, segregated model. My question is, will you change the rules governing NB Housing to allow it to integrate its 7 units presently in the city?
Yes.
Thank you.
And I'll compare that to what we did with cataract surgeries. You know, the holdback on the doctor's office and not being able to do cataract surgeries was because in the Health Act governing the RHAs, basically these surgeries had to be performed within a facility owned by Horizon or Vitality. And they said, well, what difference does that make? And doctors are saying, well, I can do this in my office, and I can do a whole lot more than I can with all the procedures required in a hospital. So we changed the legislation to do that. And so that I see very similar. And if we have underutilized systems, and you might argue, is it best in NB Housing? Is it best to find a way to fund it and have it managed by the community? I think we need to look at this whole aspect. We send, as a province, I think it's about $15 million a year that comes in the form of social assistance and nonprofits, with different groups. But are we getting the best value for the municipality in that? I feel like if there was kind of a management team that was governing this money coming into your community, so you could decide where best should it be distributed to get the best value. Because I think there's a gap here between Fredericton and the community and what's needed. And then you set priorities, because it's like we'll never have money for everything, but we should have money to deal with the priorities. And when I think of 15 million, and it may be higher now, is that getting the best value, or are we traditionally locked into some of these areas that just aren't getting the results they should? But you folks and your community's in the best position to judge that.
Thank you. Merci, Madame le Maire.
Thank you. Moving on to social issues.
Thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you, Your Worship. Mr. Premier, thank you for being here this evening. Truly appreciate that. To your candidates, Dave, Minister Steves, I can't see the gentleman behind the podium. Welcome to Mr. Turner, Mr. Sherry Wilson, and Rob Weir. Welcome as well. You've answered some really good questions this evening, and I think you understand that Moncton is probably one of the largest cities, the largest city right now in New Brunswick that has to deal with mental health and addiction services, and the people that are living on our streets and the people that are causing the most, I guess, call for service, shall we say. So I'll be very direct with my one question. Will you commit to building an inpatient stabilization and rehab center in Moncton for the most acute cases of mental health and addiction? But I'll have a backup for that as well. Where would you get the funding from to do such a rehab center and the staffing to go along with it to provide the proper services? Because right now, a lot of the nonprofit agencies such as John Howard, Harvest House are offering these services, and they can't keep up with obviously what's happening on the streets of Moncton. So, Mr. Premier, if you wouldn't mind, just answer that question for me. Thank you, Your Worship.
So certainly in the analysis of what works and what doesn't work, and it's clear our focus has been on reduction, mental health and addiction treatment recovery program. And we know that hospitals, as I said earlier, aren't equipped to manage with mental health or addiction treatment in the fullness of what they need to be. What we're finding is that we have snippets of facilities, and I use the word snippets not derogatorily, but just in terms of it needs to be more enhanced in order and be able to have greater capacity in order to treat individuals. What I have learned over the while is in meeting with community groups that are working with homeless and others on the street is how long it takes to build that level of trust, how long it takes to have someone commit to a recovery and a retreat program. And you've got to be there when they're there. So we are going to, as part of this, and Moncton, I think it goes without saying, really would be one of the areas for a center. I mean, we probably are going to need about 4 centers, but right now I don't know that that's the number. But it's a combination of looking what we have today and what we need to enhance, build on, and what we may need new. But the program is clear. It is a starting right from, if it's a sentencing, like from a judge saying, you're going to be 60 days in jail, but if you're in jail for a drug issue, we're going to be starting that rehabilitation and then moving right into a treatment center, or maybe having that option so the judge can actually say, you go to this treatment center and that'll be your penalty, and you stay there for a while. But the idea is our commitment is clear on that. What that's going to cost, I really don't know at this point. And what facilities, what I do know is that when I talk to different people, even retired nurses, I talk to doctors that want to get out of the current system, many are interested in doing something different and being part of a strategy that is making a difference with the challenges we have. So the commitment will be clear in our platform. How many, how much, I don't know, but I would say it's a pretty safe bet that Moncton would be obviously one location. And what do we have here that we can build on? That, and what does that require?
Thank you. I'll move on to you, Deputy Mayor. I think both questions were covered. So, vas-y, merci.
Merci, Madame la Maire. Bonsoir, Monsieur.
Thank you, Your Worship. Good evening, Mr. Premier. Thank you for accepting our invitation tonight. As you know, the social issues file does not fall under municipal jurisdiction, but the city of Moncton has made it one of its key priorities. So would you be responsible for providing care and reducing the number of homeless people in our community?
We need to work together on that. And I think we have. I mean, I think we got a long ways to go because we've had a lot of new people show up here and a lot of people that weren't necessarily from here that have settled in the community in a homeless structure. But I think, the minister certainly, I think, worked diligently with your council, with your mayor, trying to fix some of these things. But it's an ongoing process. And do we want to reduce the number? Absolutely. I want the streets to be emptied of homeless. People shouldn't be living on the street. And I know there's many different groups. There's one here, there's one in St. John starting up, there's the 12 neighbors in Fredericton that are building, homes for people to have a place to live. But it's more than just having a place to live. It's having a purpose. And, one of the things that struck me the most in meeting with the group, and one individual who had obviously been, had been victim of addiction for many years, but had recovered. But it was noticeable the impact that it had on this individual. But the thing that the person said to me that struck me the most was, I'm getting my social assistance check, but I don't need it all because everything is covered for me. I have someone that's managing my check. I get some money when I need it, but I'm building a bank account. And I said, she said, I never thought I'd have a bank account. I never thought that I would be able to plan my future and build some nest egg. So to that individual, it was hope. It was hope that there was a future. So when we say, is there hope every day if you're going to an injection facility and getting high and then laying around for the rest of the day and doing it again and doing it again, is that hope? Is that creating a vision for people to be proud of and to live a fulfilled life? So we have this obligation, but it is going to take some tough love because that's the only way we're going to make a difference. And we're going to have to just decide that, the time has come. We're going to help people to help themselves because it's our duty and humanity to do so.
Une dernière question. C'est un problème.
Last question. So it's not a problem that's unique in New Brunswick. It is a global issue. So what would you think would be good for prevention in that file?
It seems that it starts, and I can't claim to be certainly the expert and what the health authorities might say is how are we getting people there? At what age are children being subjected to drugs or addiction and then following down a path? As you know, we certainly support parents' role in raising their young kids. And I think that has become more and more prevalent in so many areas that parents need to be knowing what kids are doing and be part of that. We know in the schools now, as we've taken out certainly the cell phones and made the schools, certainly the classrooms more productive in the sense of following a curriculum, getting to the basics of a curriculum. Some have, suggested that we actually have curriculum that is teaching people the situations that they can fall prey to. And do we do that in school now? Do we do the basics of even financial acumen in school? Do we do the basics of, just fundamentals that we one time would have said are very important in order to make the right decisions as you go forward. So I think there's a lot of components and I can only commit here that I don't have all the answers, but I'm committed to make the decisions to make it happen.
Thank you. Councillor Butler, bring us home on community safety.
Thank you, Your Worship, and thank you, Mr. Premier, and all the candidates for coming here tonight. She didn't give me 4 minutes, so I'm good. I can talk.
Really?
Negative now? All right. Well, I've been at negative before. So, community safety is a big thing in the city of Moncton. One of the things that we've seen through Stats Canada is that in the last while, the last time it came out, we were the third highest in crime rate. And since 2021 to 2023, our policing costs went up 40%. Went from 23.4 million to 32 million. Cost of our community safety officers, we've had to employ more and more, and it's gone up 230%. So the crime rate is really, and this is from having community safety committee meetings throughout the community in the city, and people telling us that they're not feeling safe. So with that, we have talked as a council, and we would really like to see some type of commitment to changing the Police Act with the requirements that there be more training, for sure, but to empower our community safety officers. There's other places in Canada has done this, in Battleford, Saskatchewan, and in Manitoba. They've given them more say or more power, and I think that's important because this increase in policing, it's really hard to keep up with the cost that comes from Ottawa, the J Division comes to us, and we got no say. And
we're doing this, it's the same for us.
Yeah, absolutely. But we only get 10%, you get 30%, so there's a little difference. But, so we'd like to see that we'd like to have some kind of a change, at least, and look at the Police Act to see where we can, maybe as a committee or as a province, can change this. The second thing that we look at, we spoke to the other candidates also, is the mental health court. I guess some people think it is working. Some people say it's not, according to data in St. John, but mental health, we can't just keep sending them to provincial jail. We have to try to, and you even spoke about it for a minute. We have to find out some way that people are held accountable, but at the same time getting some type of results that they can come back into the community. For instance, if you get 2 years less a day and you go into the provincial jail, we should be looking at their job skills. They're 2 years walking around a yard and not doing a lot. There could be something that we can help them with. And myself personally, I'm a big believer in education. There's people that going in, and a lot of them are way behind academic-wise when they become criminals and drop out of schools. GED is a very important thing that we need to get done. But these are things that we have to have them ready for when they come out. They're not coming out into a homeless situation. They're not coming on the streets and just dropped off, and maybe even given a tent. So I just get your thoughts on that, please. Thank you.
Sure, Councillor. And firstly, I guess on the safety, increasing the capabilities of safety officers, we've done that provincially. We've trained additional 50, 60 safety officers to actually have higher levels of skill set and be stopping cars, be checking, doing routine surveys. And, if they're doing analysis, they're doing surveillance, they would call in the RCMP if it came to an actual bust of some sort or takedown or whatever. But they're those eyes and ears on the street. And so we've done that provincially, and I don't see any reason why we couldn't find a way to do that municipally, because it's the same issue. But interestingly enough, when you think of other abilities to deliver better results or more results, I think there's many areas that people would want to do more if they had the ability to do so. I'll take the sheriffs as an example of that as well. And I met with some groups that were telling me about their routine and what they did, and they said, we could do a whole lot more. And these were young sheriffs that were just wanted to be part of a bigger solution. So I guess I have, during COVID, we did that, and it is trying to get people to step up, but trying to say, what more can we do? But yes, so on the safety, I think we should be looking at that, and I agree with that. On the mental health court, no, the system hasn't worked very well in St. John, but what here seems to be the problem, there's no place for them to go. And so if you have the facilities that you can say, okay, if they're sentenced to this treatment program and there's a place to go, absolutely. But what I've been told is that there's our roadblock, is that if we can align it with space and place for someone to go for treatment and then follow up through that as a series, I think it's an absolute path. And it follows very much to the mental health and addiction recovery program that we're subscribing to. The other issues, we all submitted this as premiers of the country to the federal government to reform the bail system, because it's currently now, it's a real problem. And some of the changes that were made are putting people on the street that shouldn't be on the street. And so there's a mix there somewhere of how we blend the right sentencing for the right people and the right offense, and then the recovery for those that just kind of got offside a little bit.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Richard.
Well, I think this concludes our meeting. I'd like to thank you very much for being here tonight, Mr. Premier, and to your ministers and your potential MLAs. We appreciate you stepping up and putting your names forward. And thank you very much for your service.
Thanks, Alan. Merci beaucoup. Thank you, Mayor.
Councillor Richard.
Thank you very much.